All right, we're back. Another edition here of Colts Corner with myself, Kevin Bowen, and what is, I think, one of the more marquee games certainly one of the marquee September games I can recall in quite some time for the Colts, and I would group that into kind of any early season game. I think plenty of deserved hype, deserved intrigue to what's going to happen Sunday at 4:05 out there in Los Angeles. Again, Colts and Rams. I was kind of hoping one of the more marquee Fox crews would get this, but it'll be Kevin Kugler, who does a great job on Big Ten Network, and Daryl Johnston calling this game. Colts are 3.5, I think, point underdog. One of the bigger ones they've been in probably about 7 or 8 games going back to December of last year. So plenty to get to on today's pod. We'll obviously get to the Rams specifically, kind of go over news items. To note, I did see Jonathan Taylor, Offensive Player of the Week for a second straight week. I believe the Colts had it as the first player in franchise history to have accomplished that feat, which is saying something given the star power that they have had here over the years. Let's begin with the injury news items as we sit here on this Wednesday. I'm recording this just before going out to practice here. A little bit of a time crunch this afternoon, so coming at you a little bit earlier. And unfortunately, no Eddie Garrison today. Happy birthday to Eddie Garrison, though, here on this Wednesday, September 24th. Kenny Moore II, a calf injury is now being classified more in the Achilles area, which I think kind of goes without saying. That's a little bit more nerve-wracking. Now, again, the Colts aren't committing to anything from an injured reserve standpoint. That would put him out for 4 games. So, I guess that's continued good news. But, when I hear calf, when I hear Achilles, and I think of a cornerback, I don't know. I get nervy, and maybe being in this market has a little bit of PTSD. And honestly, just the general absence of Kenny Moore, period, I think is one that you have to acknowledge. I think he's one of the most indispensable players on this team. I think there are plays he makes, like on Sunday, that not every nickel's making that play. I think there are a lot of other plays over the course of a game where you almost take for granted what he gives you. I looked it up. He's missed 8 games over the last 3 years. The Colts have given up an average. They've given up at least 20 in all of those games, and they've given up an average of 33 in those games. So, that's a very notable number. I want to say 4 of them have been over 30, so he just means a ton, and we'll see exactly how they will replace him. Mike Hilton, the veteran, expressed plenty of expectation that he will play on Sunday. He did play 20 preseason snaps with the Dolphins. Granted, he was cut by a Dolphins team that obviously has had cornerback issues, so what's left in the tank for him at 31 years old? Do you utilize him in, as big of a role as you would Kenny? Those are all questions I think you have. Do you go with Mekhi Blackmon, who's been at the team for a little bit more than a month, but has mostly played on the outside and has kind of done a dime roll with this team? So I think just some questions to answer in a week that, certainly you are playing a marquee passing offense. I'm curious about a Mooney Ward shadow this week. Is that something you would dabble in at all? Obviously, Puka Nakua's individual resume speaks for itself, but Devontae Adams from a physique standpoint, probably a little bit more in that realm. Do you do that and then commit more attention strictly to Nakua from a multiple body standpoint? I think a lot of questions for Lou Anarumo here entering this week. So we'll see exactly how all of that plays out. And then Alec Pierce did not practice on Wednesday. Concussion protocol for him. Obviously, when you miss a Wednesday practice, that's never a great sign. 3 concussions for him in the last 3 years, I guess 3 years plus playing. So does that mean more for A.D. Mitchell? Could we see the first A.D. Mitchell touchdown of his career coming up on Sunday? Last year, Pierce missed a game, and Mitchell played 55 snaps in that game. That is a huge increase for him. And, maybe got to squint a little bit, but I think for the most part, you are pleased with what A.D. Mitchell has given you this season. Now the question becomes, okay, what happens in more of an expanded role? Do we see an uptick in catches? Certainly, just general impact from a box score standpoint, all those things with him. So, this could be a week for him to certainly make a notable impact, and the staff certainly continues to praise him in high regard. And, he drew the pass interference penalty last week, and, he can kind of be a forgotten man, I think, from some of these opponents. I do think the loss of Pierce, while some are high on Mitchell, I do think defending Pierce is just different, and the amount of respect that I think he's garnered from opposing defenses, particularly having to keep a safety deep with that home run ball, is nothing to, overlook, really. I think Pierce has earned that right in his NFL career. So definitely a storyline to watch here coming up as the week moves along. Shane Steichen did say a couple of others might miss the Wednesday practice. Could this be kind of like Tyler Warren and Josh Downs from last week? So definitely keep an eye on injury report. I got a notebook up on 1075thefan.com. Again, recording this just before we go out there for that Wednesday practice. I guess let's kind of get into Rams notes, and I think there'll inevitably be just kind of a few Colts thoughts off of that. We got a good amount of Twitter questions this week, so I want to make sure we leave time for that. But yeah, I thought Shane was pretty candid today in discussing how he has had to kind of coach this team a little differently this week, in that he's not used to coaching a team that's 3-0. I mean, I don't think the Colts have ever been 3 games over 500 under Shane, let alone the first 3 games of the season. So he's asked for kind of a day one mentality. That was the big emphasis from him here on this Wednesday of treat your work ethic like you would be treating day one of a new job. And certainly I think that makes sense where he's coming from on this. And just in general, this is different for Shane. It's different for the Colts in how they are now kind of viewed almost nationally and record-wise, of course. So that is something that, they might have to continue to, again, preach a little bit more from the, I guess, Tony Dungy, little Jim Caldwell years of, playing from ahead and more of the bullseye on your back, those sorts of things in regards to this team. Granted, you say that all in a week when they are still the underdog. I think one of the biggest, arguably the biggest key of the entire week for the Colts will be how do you disrupt the timing of Matthew Stafford? And what does that 4-man rush look like? What is the pass rush in general? Do you have to commit more on the back end without Kenny Moore? And again, does that put more pressure on the 4 and the 5-man rush? Which I think right now there are reasons to have concern about that. Stafford gets the ball out. I believe it's the 3rd fastest of anybody in the league. So again, how can you disrupt that timing? How can you get him off his spot? Shane Steichen was gushing in his praise of Stafford earlier, and just honestly the amount of toughness that he's shown in what now it's probably 16 or 17 for Stafford. I think only 4 sacks on the year, I believe, through 3 games against him. Now, Lou Anarumo, I think, has had, I'd say, some decent success against Stafford, especially when you compare him to kind of the Hall of Fame resume. 2 games against him, obviously the Super Bowl, one of those. I think it's like right around 60%, even on touchdowns and picks. I want to say it's 4 touchdowns, 4 picks, and 8 sacks in 2 games. So, again, obviously some of that you got to go a little bit further back on, but what is kind of the Lou recipe when you're facing such a quality quarterback, probably arguably the best quarterback the Colts will see all season long. So again, that to me is the biggest key, and I think what makes the Rams so good is if you are just so focused on here's Nakua, here's the plan for Adams, and here's the plan for Stafford, then boom, all of a sudden, does Kyron Williams show why he is one of the more I think in the day and age of fantasy football, I think everybody knows who Kyron Williams is, but still, he's one of the better backs in the league and has a great ability to, break tackles, and certainly was a great runner at Notre Dame. Flipping over to the other side of the ball, the Rams defense, I think what stands out to me is, again, maybe not the most heralded group like it was during the Super Bowl run, but they can get after you, and they held Saquon Barkley to an Eagles low with Saquon, with Philly, 2.6 per carry last week. So, in regards to Jonathan Taylor, who has been so good this season, so good in second halves, can you, continue to rely on that? And is that kind of home run that we've seen in each of these first couple games, is that still there in the second half? I think that would be something that definitely you have to keep an eye on. So I think that is something that, I'll be watching for coming up on Sunday. And then in regards to Daniel Jones, it's funny. I wrote something on our website this week, and Stafford had a lot of high praise for him in his SiriusXM radio appearance earlier in the week. But when you look at the Daniel Jones season so far, and you kind of pinpoint, okay, what is the most impressive thing to him? I mean, there are so many things you can point to. Again, the pinpoint accuracy of giving guys opportunities not only to catch it, but make plays after the catch. Taking shots down the field, the willingness to it. And again, I'll stress what I said on Monday, staying away from those negatives. That, to me, is probably the single most. Shane pointed a little bit more behind the scenes to, and that's kind of what my story touched on our website of there's so much behind the scenes that, Michael Pittman Jr. told a great story about Thursday. They usually go out to dinner, and Jones is always late, and Pittman always finds himself calling him, being like, dude, where are you? And he's like, I wanted to watch one more thing film-wise. It's like, well, if you're going to be late, that's probably a pretty good reason why to be late. But the NFL sent out something earlier this week about his consistency, and he's the only player in the league so far through 3 weeks, at least 225 yards, at least one touchdown throw, and no interceptions. And again, to me, that's C word. And that kind of gets into the no negatives too. Like, you see quarterbacks around the league put up good numbers, but yet here's the 2 interceptions, or here's the 3 sacks, or here's a fumble or 2 loss. And when you stay away from that stuff, you don't have to be, honestly, as eye-popping in the other stuff. He is pretty eye-popping, honestly, and the other stuff, but you don't have to be. And the Colts lead the league in first down efficiency as well, and that is, again, more the methodical, staying ahead of the chains. I want to say the stat was like 59% of their first downs have gone for at least 4 yards, so that is obviously something that, really stands out as well. So, I think for Jones, it's more of the, okay, not that LA is the greatest road environment, but I think it's a better defense, certainly, than you saw last week. I think it'll be more of a road environment than, what you had, a little bit, certainly in Nashville. But now it's, again, more film, stringing things together. Those will certainly be key items to keep an eye on. I will say the Rams a little bit banged up at corner. Can you take advantage of that? It looked like Philly had some success using A.J. Brown's physicality. So, Pittman especially, but even Warren, can you get those guys out in space where those corners, those smaller corners, are going to have to make some tackles? I think that'll be a key item to watch. Okay, let's transition to a few Twitter questions here. This one from Hosh, hope I'm saying that right. He goes, can't stop thinking about Shane Steichen's introductory press conference where he said the mantra for the team offensively was throw to score, run to win. After 3 weeks, the best and most consistent QB play he's had as Colts head coach, I think it's clear his mantra has come to life. What do you think the Colts can do to keep this vision clear? I'd say limiting Taylor's touches in the first half to lessen the load comes to mind, but wanted to know your thoughts. Yeah, that certainly is a very modern approach to, how football is in today's day and age, and certainly the Colts have probably struggled with that given the quarterback play. I would say specifically with Taylor, one of the biggest questions that you have comes down to how many body blows are you sending in the first half? Go back to the 46-yarder he ripped off on Sunday. At that point, he had about 12 carries for, I think it was like 45 yards. Again, nothing to light up your fantasy roster about, but are you sending body blows? Are you kind of chopping the tree or, hammering the nail? And yes, you might not be done, but you're trying to build to that climactic moment, I guess, as much as hammering a nail and finally being done with it. You kind of feel like that's part of the run game. And I think there's a lot there. And, Taylor, obviously, the last 2 weeks especially, has ripped off the big one. So, again, I understand where you're coming from on that, the throw to score. And certainly the Miami game, they threw a ton early. But with Taylor especially, I do think it's a difficult balance to walk as a play caller of how many body blows are you trying to send. And when the sledding is tough, when do you say abandon ship? And when do you say, no, we're going to reap the benefit? It might just be at minute 48 in the game or 51 in the game. This from Gary. Gary goes, I've been around Thunderbird pilots and Navy SEALs. Boy, shout out to Gary's life. Always been impressed with the pilots' quiet swagger and the SEALs being understated badasses. The most extended time I've seen Daniel Jones is on the Manning cast. He's played QB in the biggest stages and one of the most vicious markets ever, and I really don't have a word to describe him. Would you say quiet, understated, humble? I'm wondering if I had a beer and burger with this guy, what would he be like? You've been around him a few months now. What's this dude like? Yeah, I mean, certainly in media settings, he's boring. I mean, he is exactly what you saw in the Manning cast. He's not going to give you much at all. I do think there is more to him. I don't want to act like there's split personalities by any means, and he's, Pat McAfee away from a camera. I don't think that. I mean, he's enjoying himself in the Indy 500. He's enjoying himself at a Pacer game. He's showing up to high school games here locally. It's not like this is a film robot sitting in the corner of his house 24/7, 365, not communicating with anybody in the world, but, he is definitely on the quieter side. I am curious, how much did the scar tissue of New York, is that at play with, his reluctancy to, be very open in those media settings. But clearly teammates have a level of respect for him. And that's both sides of the ball. Now, how much of that is just rooted in, strictly work ethic? And, boy, that guy is so intellectually smart, and he's always here. We're naturally, going to have respect for him. I think that could be at play a little bit. So, again, he is largely quiet, and I don't think you're getting a whole lot, no matter conversationally, but I think that this is something that, maybe there's a little bit more than what he's leading on. And he obviously wasn't too forthcoming even in the Manning cast moments there on Monday. This one from Craig. Are you surprised Shane Steichen hasn't used AR at all as part of a wrinkle in the offense? They're cruising, but for sure adding Richardson to the mix could be special. I thought at the start of the year, Steichen was going to kind of ground Richardson, for lack of a better term, and that's what's happened. 3 games in, he obviously hasn't sniffed the field. If you watch him, it's not even like, he's got his helmet on, and we might turn around and throw you in there in a short yardage moment or a red zone. And I guess my question becomes, do you think he could help you in the red zone? For what it's worth, in Richardson's career, that's one of his better areas of the field, albeit, the other areas of the field are struggling to him. But I'm not one that says, oh, look what Daniel Jones is doing. There's no reason to turn to Richardson. Or, Richardson had his chance. He doesn't deserve another opportunity. Right now I think the Colts, I want to say, are 26 in red zone. If you are a bottom team in a certain area or aspect, I'm going to look at ways to improve it. And if I think there are personnel guys that can specifically do that, a third down rusher, a pass-catching running back, those sorts of things, an extra defensive back on third and long, then I think you have to look into that. And I don't care what the quarterback's history is. I don't care where you drafted him. You dress 46 guys on a game day for a reason. And so I look into it. I know some people are hesitant about the injury situation. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should pay more attention to that, given Richardson's track record. But, again, that wouldn't be just the ultimate eliminator for me. This from Jimmy. He goes, I was very pessimistic about the team preseason because I didn't see any substantial changes. I'm not totally sold on this team, but I'm seeing a lot more than I expected. So my question is, what changed to make this much of a difference? Jimmy, I'll probably go back to what I said on Monday about the 1 to 10 scale with Eddie. And I think I remember you sent in a question about it. I do, people said, oh, it's the same old Colts. I'm like, well, they might be, at the end of the day, the same old Colts, but they have made some changes. Let's not ignore them. Obviously, quarterback. But even before the quarterback battle played out, defensively, they've systematically made a 180. They've, invested in the secondary like no other. And then, Tyler Warren, I think, has kind of spoken for itself here through the first few weeks of the season. So, I definitely pushed back on people that are like, well, it's going to be the same old because they didn't do anything. Well, they did do stuff. Again, it might not pan out, but they did do different things. I think it's difficult at times in the early stages, and I think back to the Pacers season, I saw someone tweet out earlier this week, at this point in the NFL season, we're 14 games through an NBA season. And I mean, the Pacers had to have been under 500, 14 games in the season this past year. And then obviously look at what happened here. So they had bad injury health to start the season, and they turned it around. Like, are the Colts going to be, if you look at the Colts schedule this week, we're talking major injuries. Najee Harris done for the year, James Conner done for the year, Nick Bosa done for the year. Does that injury bug start to hit the Colts? Or just level of play. Obviously, the 3 teams you played, they're 1-8, and the one win is over Tennessee. So, again, how long can you sustain it? Those are all opportunities to prove themselves. But I go back to what I said on Monday. The Colts are doing things right now they haven't done since 2021. And that 2021 season had to take the collapse of all collapses to miss the playoffs. So they didn't do this in 2022. When they won 4 games. They didn't do it in 23 when they got to, the edge of the playoffs. They didn't do it in 24, which I can't say they were at the edge of the playoffs, but, they were somewhat, they were a possible playoff team in mid-December. And now, 3 games in, they're doing stuff they haven't done in quite some time. And the last time they did it, they were certainly in the conversation all the way up until the final, week of the season. This from Brian with the massive improvements in Indiana Jones. I think Daniel Jones asked about that today. I don't think he likes that one. Does this just further solidify the massive whiff that Chris Ballard had in selecting Anthony Richardson? Jones is his team playing at elite level. It's really nice to have competent football back in Indianapolis. Yeah, I think at this point, you could probably classify Richardson as a bust, a whiff, however you want to label him. We'll see if he gets another opportunity here. If I'm Anthony Richardson, there might be a little bit of like, boy, I really would have liked, Tyler Warren to be part of my arsenal when I was playing quarterback. I do think he could have helped Richardson out. And honestly, the further we get removed from Richardson, and you hear Shane Steichen and Daniel Jones' really obsessive relationship about, preparation and the Monday through Saturday work ethic and all of that, I just get further confused about spending the 4th overall pick on Richardson. It's clear you need immense amount of mental acumen to play quarterback, especially to draft a dude 4th overall. And for that to have not played out, it's like, man, spending that. Did you think you could develop that? Were you sold a bag of different goods than you thought there? What is kind of at play there? This from Terp. I know it was talked about when the signings happened, but how much do you think the Colts 3-0 starts because the guy's winning pedigree signed during the offseason? I feel like the surprise of how well Daniel Jones has played has overshadowed much of a difference players with winning pedigrees. Well, the 2 guys that are obvious are Mooney and Cam Bynum. So, Ballard didn't really harp on that. He kind of just called it an added bonus. But, I do think that side of the ball especially has gotten a big, whiff of that. And so I think it's inevitable not to not that Mooney's the most outgoing guy or most talkative guy, but I think you do have some of that just naturally rubs off on guys. Now, offensively, it's largely the same. Daniel Jones obviously doesn't have much of a winning pedigree at all there. And, really the Colts are, defensively, they are older. Latu and Nick Cross the only guys on rookie contracts? I don't know. I probably have to double back on that and see exactly where it is. Tyler wanted to ask about the linebackers assessment of that. Do I envision the Colts making a midseason trade? It was funny. Someone was asking me today, hey, they pointed at Anthony Walker. How many games do you think Anthony Walker might play for the Colts this season? He's on the practice squad right now. We got a couple linebacker-related questions. I'm continuing to be skeptical of that position, particularly when you see some running backs in space. Look at the tight end position you're about to see, whether it's Higbee, whether it's Brock Bowers, whether it's Trey McBride. You're going to see some, I think Jonnu Smith with the Steelers. You're going to start to see some better tight ends here in the coming weeks. Kyle Pitts a little bit more down the road even. So that position, they still clearly are up in the air on it. Last week we saw Austin Ajike get some snaps with 3 guys really for 1 spot with Bocce and Cameron Grown as well. So I think it's definitely a question and a concern you have. Could I see the Colts making a midseason trade? Again, we've just seen so few in-season trades, period, let alone, and that's league-wide, let alone, Ballard specifically. So I'd probably say no, just because the urgency of linebacker has really never been there this offseason, but I guess maybe when you get in the season, the urgency changes a little bit. Clayton here, the final one. I've been blown away by how good the offense has looked through 3 games. Shane is calling great plays, especially considering I thought he took a step back last year. It's good to see the offense be fun and interesting. He does have one complaint. The red zone offense seems to struggle. I know we've scored a lot of points, but I feel like we've kicked way too many short field goals against the better teams that could come back to bite us. I know it's always so funny on, play callers and, how you evaluate them. Is Shane Steichen really, that much of a different play caller than he was in 2023, 2024? Or does he just have more available to him? Or are the plays just working and they didn't work? That's the hard thing about, and I say that for any play caller, just how you evaluate them versus they're calling the wrong play and the defense is one step ahead of them, or is it just lack of execution? But as far as the red zone is concerned, yes, I would agree you are playing with fire a little bit. But again, I said this a couple weeks ago with Eddie. This is where I think the offense right now, people are asking this question, are the Colts for real? Their offense can't keep this up, right? And it's well, yeah, they probably won't keep up one punt again over the next 3 weeks. But let's say they start to punt it more. But then the red zone offense goes from being 26th in the league to being 13th in the league. You can still be scoring the same amount of points if you're just finishing off some of these drives. Yeah, you might throw in an extra punt or two. But if you're turning some of the 3s into 7s, and that adds up, and 45% of the red zone goes to 60-some%, that can also pay some big dividends. It might not be the exact equal result, but for as good of the Colts are moving the football right now, and it's historically good, they still aren't hitting their full ceiling if you really wanted to be the eternal kind of offensive optimist with where they're at right now. So, I don't know, it's just something I've thought about here with the offense. All right, week 4, like I said, I think it's 3.5-point underdog. The Colts, I believe the over-under is one of the highest in the league this here in week 4. 48.5. I'm going to go Rams. I do think it'll be a great game. Again, I'm really looking forward to it. I just think the absence of Kenny Moore and then no Alec Pierce, and that's kind of where it's trending. I'm going to go Rams 27-24. Can you get to Stafford enough? And then do you not forget about Kyron Williams? I think that's kind of a big storyline on the other side of it, away from Alec Pierce. Is absence, and then again, obviously, Kenny impacts where you're at from Matthew Stafford. So I expect a great game, but I'll go Rams 27-24. Thank you for listening to this edition of Colts Corner with myself, Kevin Bowen. We'll be back on Monday recapping Colts and Rams, Week 4.